What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a profile for the brand new meta contender, the Voiceless Voice. This is a brand new ritual based archetype that we received in Phantom Nightmare, and I'm going to give you a demo list that you can look at, use yourself, whether you are going to be playing it yourself or facing it at your local environment, so you know the ins and outs. At the end of the video as well, I'll also show you a very basic combo so you know where it gets started and how it finishes. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. With that out of the way, let's dive headfirst into this profile and show you exactly what Voiceless Voice is. So, you might be familiar with the first card I'm going to show you, and that is of course Diviner of the Herald. If you have been questioning recently why this card has been rocketing up in price, this is the main reason. It is such a core and important starter for the entire deck, and the reason for that is, on summon, Diviner will be able to send the Trius from the deck to the graveyard. In doing so, what this is going to give you is this is going to give you a level 9 in the graveyard that contribute off Diviner, summoning itself out, while also then being able to summon out the brand new the prayers of the priest, Voiceless Voice. Whoa, they might like to make these words and names tongue-tied, don't they? So not only does Diviner allow you to do that, but it can also send you Herald of the Arclight from the extra deck, or of course Elder Entity Ints for a bit of board removal or consistency and able to get you to more of your ritual cards. It is such a core and important starter, alongside, of course, what I would say is brand new sister in the form of Lo, the Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. Now, this is currently the most expensive secret rare in the entire set. Ironically, the ultra rares of Ponix, or Poplus, and of course the Promethean Princess is also relatively high as well. But what Lo does, which is what makes it so incredibly good, is if you ritual summon exactly one light ritual monster, warrior or dragon with a card effect that requires use of monsters, this card could be used as the entire tribute for that card. If this card is normal or special, you get to place a voiceless spell or trap, continuous spell or trap directly from the deck face out into your spell and trap zone. So it places it, which means it can get past anti-spell fragrance. And on top of that, the fact that it places it as well means it's activated straight away, so you can use the trap card that exact turn if you wanted to. On top of that, if a light ritual monster, warrior or dragon is special to your field while this card is in the graveyard, except during damage state, you get to special summon it back. So it constantly keeps looping itself as resource, which is absolutely insane. And you'll see how important it is when we get to the ritual monster in the form of the Skull Guardian, for the pure fact that Skull Guardian gains additional effect when Lo is on the field or in the graveyard. Of course, I'm just going to put the one Trius here so you know that it's now a part of the entire profile. Then of course we play free Saphira, Dragon Queen of the Voiceless Voice. She may look familiar, and that is because it's the humanized version of the original Saphira Dragon. It's a shame this doesn't come in ulti, because Saphira Dragon does, but this one does come as a quarter century secret rare, which looks beautiful. So of course you get to discard this card to send a ritual spell from the deck to the graveyard. Then you can add a light ritual monster, warrior or dragon, from the deck or graveyard to your hand. You can banish this card from the graveyard, ritual summon one light ritual monster, warrior or dragon, from your hand by attributing monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster you are trying to summon. You can only use each effect once per turn. And then of course we've got the ritual monster in the form of Skull Guardian, Protector of the Voiceless Voice. Now this is your main boss monster, mini towers, you name it. So this one requires of course exactly level 7 or exceeding it, which is very easy to do in this entire deck. So you get to ritual summon this card with Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. It gains 2050, so it makes it a baseline of 4100, while you have Lo, Prayer of the Voiceless Voice, on the field or in the graveyard. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If this card is ritual summoned, you get to add a Voiceless Voice monster or a ritual monster, warrior or dragon, from your deck to the hand. When your opponent activates a card or effect and you control Lo, the Priestess, quick effect, you get to negate the activation. If you do, destroy it. Now this is a double-edged sword, because it is such a powerful card. You don't really want your opponent just going talents and stealing it. Now obviously when they steal it, unless you're in the mirror match, they're not going to be controlling Lo, so it doesn't become as much of a beat stick, but it does take away such a powerful boss monster for you, especially when you consider Barrier of the Voiceless Voice, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, provides non-target protection, so the only way they're going to steal it is talents. You do need to be a little bit careful. The next card we are playing is 2 of the Saravas. Now this is of course the human version of, I'm just going to skip to it now, the Saravas Dragon, which we do play in this deck, and that's very important. I'll explain that later on. So you get to special summon this card from the hand by shuffling 2 spells from your hand and or graveyard into the deck, including a ritual spell. You can only special summon Saravas Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice once per turn this way. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you get to return this card from the field to the hand to special summon a light ritual monster, warrior or dragon from your hand or deck, but shuffle it into the deck during the end phase of the next turn. So the idea is you're going to be summoning out something like a Saravis, and then you've got basically a walking, talking solemn warning, which is really nice. And then, of course, for the remainder of the ritual monsters, we play the one Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon and the one Saravis. Now, the Saravis is pretty straightforward and simple. However, with the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph, unlike the others that can be special summoned through the decks through the Voiceless cards, this one will need to be specifically ritual summoned. However, the ritual spell that you do use does allow you to use light monsters for a light ritual monster, so it's very easy to make. So you get to ritual summon this card with Odd Eyes Advent. It doesn't have to be ritual summoned with it, but it must be either ritual summoned or pendulum summoned from the hand. Each time your opponent special summons a monster or monsters from the extra deck, inflict 300 damage to them. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell card or effect, quick effect, you get to place this card into your pendulum zone, and if you do, negate that effect. If you place this ritual summoned card into the pendulum zone, you can special summon an Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. So if you wanted to spice it up and play an Odd Eyes monster in your extra deck, by all means you could do. But the idea is it's just a nice little bit of a boss monster that can help you negate some spells. Carrying on with the rest of the Voiceless Voice cards, we are playing triple Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. This card's absolutely incredible. So while you control Lo, the Prayer of the Voiceless Voice, and a light ritual monster, your opponent's monsters can only target ritual monsters for attacks. Also, your opponent cannot target light monsters you control with card effects. During your main phase, you can add one Voiceless Voice card or a Skull Guardian ritual monster from your deck to the hand, except Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. You can only use each effect once per turn. Now, you may think instantly this deck will suck against Droll, which it does. Droll does hurt this deck, but there are ways to play around it, and if you do want to see how you can do that, I highly advise you going out and checking out MST TV's video, because they'll show you 3 combos at the start of the video, all in different scenarios. One is just the pure combo, which I'll show you at the end of the video. One is how they play through Droll and Lockbird. It's a really kind of cool video. The build is a little bit different. It does play the Dogmatica version. As a preview, I am playing pre-preparation of rights, and I'll explain that when I get to it as to why I chose that over the Dogmatica version. The last 2 Voiceless Voice cards is, of course, the Prayers of the Voiceless Voice, which is your ritual spell card. So you can only this card can be used to ritual summon any light ritual monster. So that's how you get to summon out the Odd Eyes monster. You must also tribute light monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster you are trying to summon. If a face-up light ritual monster or monsters you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, except during a damage step, you get to banish this card from the graveyard to special summon one Saravis, one Saphira, or a Skull Guardian from your deck or hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. So very nice, and the idea is this is your ritual spell that you're going to be cycling back with your main deck effect monster Saravis. The last one, of course, is Radiance of the Voiceless Voice. Now, I have considered playing this at 2, just as a pre-note. I'm not decided if I want to play 1 or 2. I'm going to see how it goes. There are complete justifications for playing it at 2 and complete justifications of playing it at 1. So I'm just waiting to see what feels best to me in my particular playstyle, and I've got no qualms about bumping it up to 2 if need be. So, for the trap card, during the main phase, you get to activate one of these effects. Shuffle a light ritual monster, warrior or dragon, or a ritual spell from your hand or graveyard into the deck, and if you do, add to your hand or special summon a Voiceless Voice monster from the deck. Alternatively, you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of light ritual monsters, warrior and or dragon you control, destroy both this card and as many of those targeted monsters as possible. So the idea is that you're only ever really going to be controlling Skull Guardian. Sometimes you'll control the Saravis as well, so it can become a pop 2. You just need to know when that effect is worth using and when the search one is. Then, of course, instead of Nadir Servant, I am playing triple Preparation of Rites. The reason I've gone with this is this one because the ritual spell in the form of the Prayers of the Voiceless Voice mentions Saravis. You can pre-prep into this. Now, if you're not playing pre-prep and you want to go for the Dogmatica engine, then that's where you'd probably consider, okay, 1 is completely fine of that. You'd play 3 Nadir Servant, 1 Maximus. I'm still kind of getting the ratios right with Preparation of Rite, Nadir Servant, the Prayers of the Voiceless Voice, and the Saravis. Because, of course, this becomes dead if you open up either of those, and you need to be able to recycle the Saravis monster as well as the ritual spell as well. So it's a two-edged sword. I'm trying it out to see how I feel. The way I kind of looked at it was, if I activate Preparation of Rites and then get drolled afterwards, at least I've got the targeted protection. I was more concerned about getting the targeted protection for Lo and, of course, Diviner, because when you think about it, this card and Nadir Servant can both get stopped by Ash. Whereas with the Nadir Servant route, yes, it locks you out of your extra deck, and on top of that, it can then be hit in other ways. Like if they droll you, you're not going to get the search off of your Herald of the Arc Light, you're not going to get the draw off the Garura, you're not going to be able to get the draw and put back off of Ferrijit. So there's loads of different things that it ticks off if you do get hit with Droll. Whereas this one, once you get hit with Droll, you've got the Saravas, which is what you were going for as your protection, and you also have your ritual spell to complete your summon. So it just seemed that it required less steps, plus on the fact of that, getting the Saravas that early means I don't need to worry about an imperm on my low, on my Diviner, or of course my Maximus. So I'm trying to cover as many protection bases as possible, because to me, every time I've played Diviner in a deck, when it gets hit by an Imperm or a Veiler, it can be very devastating because you're just stuck there with a monster that, yes, of course, you can link it off. Yes, there are other ways through Saphira to get it on the board to create synchro summons and everything else. But if you don't have those additional cards to follow up, you need to make sure you've got as much protection as possible in order to do so. And I feel that when we're going into this format right now, and you'll see this with my build, there's loads of decks that are playing huge amounts of hand traps, whether it be Drolls, whether it be Imperms, Veilers, Ashes, you name it, you need to be able to protect yourself as much as possible, which is why I'm also playing my good old-fashioned Call by the Grave and Instant Fusion combo, which I'll talk to you about later on. Then for the draw power of the deck, we are playing Triple Pot of Prosperity. I feel this is probably like the best card for the deck. Being able to burn through the extra deck, and like I said, the extra deck has a lot of flexibility. There's not really any cards, well, there's probably like 3 or 4 cards that you are staple with that will be in every deck you can get away with. But then the rest of it is all flexible, that you're either going to be using as super body targets, you're going to be using them as dogmatic targets, or of course you can just use them as flex spots for specific matchups where they may or may not come in. So being able to activate something like Pot of Prosperity can be massively important. The best thing about this is activate Pot of Prosperity, reveal, Call by the Grave, lol, try Droll me now. And then of course to protect me through Droll, and of course Ash and everything else, Call by an Instant Fusion. I think the strongest hand trap of this format right now is of course going to be Infinite Impermanence, just because it's even harder to stop Infinite Impermanence from being like negated. Like you can't Call by the Grave it and you can't Millenniumize it. Of course you could, as you see that I'm playing 2 of these, you could consider these as 2 crossouts because I am playing so many different hand traps, entirely up to you. There are times where crossout would actually be really, really good, especially in the times when they might drop a Triple Tactics Talent on you, or a Triple Tactics Thrust, evenly matched, you name it, even a D-Barrier, which would be very, very funny. So crossout can also be considered in these 2 slots as well if you want to, which is why a lot of people are trying to buy up crossouts right now, because again, I expect as we move into the format, you'll see that I'm going to show you 9, and that's like on the lower end of the hand traps that a lot of people are using. A lot of people are using anywhere between 9 to 15 hand traps in this format, which is absolutely insane. So for the hand traps, of course, Triple Ash Blossom, Triple Draw and Lockbird. I decided to go with the main of Draw and Lockbird, and the reason for that is you've got to be careful. When you Ash your opponent, there's a couple of cards now in the game that can help them crack back. Sometimes an Ash does not end their turn. It's not quite like Branded of old, where you'd Ash their Branded Fusion, that would be it. Now people are playing Triple Tactics Thrust, Triple Tactics Talents. You don't really want to give them hand knowledge. You don't want them stealing your monsters. You've got to be very, very protective. So when you're activating a Draw and Lockbird, the reason I prefer that over something like an Ash is because I know even if they do Talents me, I've already reduced one of the outcomes that they could possibly get. And if they thrust me and I've got a monster, again, I've already reduced one of the outcomes they can get. They can't add it to the hand, they will have to set it. And unless that set card is going to be something absolutely amazing for them, it will cause them a lot of issues. On top of that, Draw and Lockbird is such a powerful kind of grind card if you are going second, or heck, even if you go first, when you've already got a pre-established board and they're trying to build their board and they need to get a couple of searches off, you draw them, it's game over. Especially in a format where the Fire Dex is probably going to take the predominant route, and even this deck itself will be seen quite a lot. And I think the next big event we have is the 3v3 in Vegas, so we'll see what is going to get utilized. But the idea is that if you draw your opponent, whether they've activated Bonfire, whether they've activated Low, anything like that, straight away you really do limit their outcomes from the back of it. And I feel that Droll, unless you're going to a local environment where your opponents are not searching on a regular basis, then you put it into the side deck. For me right now, going into the format, if I was expecting to face the mirror match and I was expecting to face a lot of fire type decks that are going to be doing a lot of searching through Bonfire and everything else, Draw and Lockbird to me is an absolute mainstay staple. And then, of course, we've got Triple Infinite Impermanence, not much more to be said about that, and Triple Tactic Talents, because if you go second and they hand trap you, you want to make sure you punish them as much as possible. Even if they draw you, you want to get knowledge of their hand, you want to rip away any one of their cards that might start them going, and then you're just going to reduce their chances of being able to crack back to break your board. So that's it for the entire main deck. Now moving on to the extra deck. Now the extra deck is just going to be a lot of extra shiny flex in a sense. You can play different options. You don't have to play the exact cards that I'm going to show you, but the idea is that each of them has a purpose, and I'll explain those as we go. So we'll start off with the only XYZ of the deck, and that of course is Super Star Slayer Typhoon. Now the reason this is so important in the deck is because there's a lot of times where your opponent will summon multiple times through the extra deck, and you're able to go, cool, normal summon any monster I want, imperm, let's say you go normal summon your Diviner and the imperm Diviner, you go, okay, cool, slap Typhoon on top, straight away Typhoon, you've upgraded what would be considered a relatively weak Diviner into a very strong Typhoon that can bounce back one of the problem monsters and then build from that point on. It's more of a failsafe, so it has the flexibility, which is one of the ones where you may or may not want to play it, whether you have access to it or not, but it's still an incredibly powerful card. For the Synchros, I've gone with the one Axel Stardust and the one Baron. Now, the idea behind this is if your Herald does get stopped, then you have the ability through Axel and Saphira, through Diviner and Saphira to go into Axel. Axel can then bring back Diviner, and then you go into Baron. Other cards you could consider are stuff like Chaos Angel, but personally, I wasn't a fan of Chaos Angel because the majority of the time when you make it in this deck, yes, you don't need to rely on the tuner, but when you make it, all you're really going to do is get that banish, which is only going to be useful for you going second, and then the effect that it gains is only going to be the light effect, which means your synchro monsters cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Whereas if you're using dark monsters, they can't be destroyed. All your monsters can't be destroyed by battle, which in my opinion is the much stronger version. So I wouldn't want just my Chaos Angel to be there like, okay, cool, come at me, bro, because it's not that hard to out that Chaos Angel. Whereas if it was like all my monsters couldn't be destroyed by battle, then it's a bit more of a step up. So I felt that it wasn't required in this deck, and it's kind of why I've taken it out. Then for the targets to send from the extra deck off, of course, your Diviner is, of course, Herald of the Arclight, such as any of your ritual monsters or ritual spell. Elder Stand to the Unts as your go second way of being able to pop a card. And then Millenniumize Restrict to combo off with your Instant Fusion. So again, this is the downside of playing the Instant Fusion route, is because if you go Instant Fusion, you do lose a spot in the extra deck. Whereas if you go for Cross Out, you're not going to do that. You just need to make sure you're playing a big enough range of hand traps so that it's consistent and effective for you throughout. For the Link monsters, we play a very kind of cool range on these ones. So we'll start with the Link one. So for the Link one, we've got Salamangreat Almirage. Now this is just one of them ones, because we're going into a fire format, everything that I'm about to show you for the fires now, and I'll show you the fire engine now, is all subject to if your local environment is fire heavy. If your local environment is not fire heavy, then you can take these out. But the idea is that you can turn a Diviner into Almirage. All you need to do is get another monster to the board, and then you use Almirage and that additional monster to go into Heater. Heater then steals a fire monster from your opponent's graveyard, and then you use Heater plus that fire monster to go into your Princess. Princess can then use its own effect to bring a fire monster back from the graveyard, and then you link up and go into the Amber Whale. So you've basically turned an Imperm on your Diviner and then one additional extender to the board, all the way up to an Amber Whale with a Princess set up in the graveyard, ready to kind of crack back. Like I said, if your local environment is not fire heavy, and I know this card is expensive right now, then you can play a completely different engine. This can then be your Super Poly targets, it could be your Nadir targets. You've got so much flex spot, and if they're not useful in that particular matchup and you don't think they're going to be useful at all, you just get rid of them with Pot of Prosperity, sorry. And then of course the staple darks, which is obviously IP into SP. Like, unfortunately, there's a reason this card is like £90 to £100. It's just so incredibly powerful, it's unreal. And then for the other extra deck monsters we play is a one Cross Sheep. Like, you're playing fusions, well, I say fusion. If you did play Super Poly, then obviously the fusion effect would be more relevant, and it can bring back Diviners and Lows, which is really nice. Alternative to that as well, you are also playing ritual monsters, so you do get to trigger the Draw 2, Ditch 2, which can be pretty helpful. If you don't want to be playing Cross Sheep, I would definitely advise making a second Dyna Mondo. Now, Dyna Mondo is absolutely insane. It's such a great card for any ritual-based deck. So it requires 2 monsters, including a ritual monster. It doesn't need to be a ritual monster that's been successfully summoned, so it can just be used willy-nilly. However, it will need a successfully summoned ritual monster to bring it back from the graveyard. So if this card is special summoned, you get to target 1 card in the field and 1 ritual monster in the graveyard. Shuffle both into the deck. Woohoo! Recycle that Saravis. During your opponent's turn, quick effect, you get to tribute this card, then target a ritual monster in your graveyard, either add it to the hand or special summon it. So obviously if you want to special summon it, it will need to be successfully summoned first, otherwise you will not be able to do so. And the last card, of course, is Access Code Talker. Now, the reason for this is, as you can already see, we've got Earths, we've got Fires, we've got Darks. We've got plenty of different attributes for Access Code to become a fat stack boss monster. And heck, even if you really wanted to and get incredibly spicy, you can use the Amber Whale. Yes, it will be treated as a Link 1, but if you use Amber Whale to make Access Code, it goes up to a 6,300 attack monster, which is very, very nice and very, very strong. So that's pretty much it for the entire profile. Now what I'm going to do is I'll take you through the 1 card combo to get you started so you know the exact basics of this deck and just how good it can be. This card right here is the reason that it is so expensive. This is the 1 card combo that will plus you so much advantage. It's absolutely insane, which is why I wanted to build the deck to protect it where at all possible. Now obviously that's where Diviner can be quite helpful, because Diviner can also access it, so you're technically playing like 6 routes to low. So what you're going to do is you're going to normal summon out low, you're going to use this effect, and this will then allow you to place a Voiceless Voice card directly from the deck. So you're going to be going into the Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. On top of that, you can then use the Barrier of the Voiceless Voice to add a Voiceless Voice card. God, I'm going to be saying Voiceless Voice so many times. So you're going to be going for the Saphira Dragon Queen of the Voiceless Voice. I'm just going to say VV, maybe. Then activate Saphira's effect in the hand. So you get to discard it to send a ritual spell from the deck to the graveyard, and then you get to add a light ritual monster. So you're going to send the prayers of the Voiceless Voice to the graveyard, and then this is going to allow you to add your Skull Guardian. You're then going to be able to use the graveyard effect of Saphira, which is why it is so incredibly good. So this one will allow you to basically banish it from the graveyard, ritual summon a light ritual monster, warrior or dragon from the hand by treating monsters from the hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed. Now the best thing about that is Low could be treated as the entire tribute requirements. So we're going to be tributing off Low to summon down our Guardian. At this point, you'll then be able to trigger off Low's effect as well, which will allow it to bring itself back from the graveyard. And you've also got the ability of your Skull Guardian, which is definitely just going to be putting in a bit of work for you. And you're pretty much going to be setting up your Low and Skull Guardian combo, which is very, very nice. So what we do here is you'll be able to bring Low back from the graveyard. And then, of course, if this card is Ritual Summons, you get to add a Voiceless Voice monster or a Ritual Monster, Warrior, or Dragon. So you bring back Low. Usually you'd want to go Chain Link 1 Skull Guardian, Chain Link 2 Low, because then you bring back Low, it kind of chain blocks this from being ashed, whereas this will be belled, so it really depends which one you want to go for. So you then get to add the Saravas for your targeted protection. You can add anything you want, but I quite like this idea, so it means that my opponent can't target my stuff. I know they already can't target it through Barrier, but there are just times where it's like, okay, I want that additional line of protection if I need to. You don't have to go for it, but it gives you a bit of variety. Then the best thing to do from here is you want to link off. Now, of course, you can link these off one by one. So, for example, I could link this off if I'm going second and go into like an Almirage, or not an Almirage, sorry, a Link Rebo or a Link Shanamar if you play it. Ideally, what you're going to want to go to now, which is going to be most effective with exactly what you've got, considering you're going first, is you're going to go into your Dynamondo. In doing so, what you can do here is you're going to pass your opponent, and what you're going to be able to do is early doors, you can use Dynamondo's effect to tribute off to bring back the Skull Guardian, which will also trigger off to bring back the Low, and then you'll trigger off Low's effect to place the trap card on the field. So you've got the Saravas in the hand. This just allows you to give you protection to your Dynamondo. It does tribute as cost, but if they try and stop it early doors, you can protect it and leave it so that you can activate it when you want to. Otherwise, you're going to be able to get into your Skull Guardian. Now, the one thing to remember about Skull Guardian is when you bring it back this way, it is not ritual summons. You don't get to add a Voiceless Voice. It is just special summoned back from the graveyard. You've also got to remember as well that if you do keep your Dynamondo on the board during the turn it is summoned, you get to target a card on the field and a ritual monster in the graveyard and shuffle them both in. So when you summoned it during your turn, if you wanted to, you can shuffle back, but you don't really need to. So now you've got the Radiance of the Voiceless Voice active and ready to go. So you've got the ability, as it is a trap card, to during your opponent's main phase, shuffle a light ritual monster, warrior, dragon, or a ritual spell from the hand or graveyard into the deck, and add to your hand or special summon a Voiceless Voice monster. So you have the ability to spin back the prayers if you want to, and then of course you've got the ability to get a Voiceless Voice monster, which can get you into, very nicely, the Saravas as well. Now you can go further and further depending on the board state and everything else that's being built up in front of you, but this is just basically the bottom line of what this deck can do, like being able to get direct access to these. This is then giving you targeted protection because you've got everything on the board. This is now getting buffed because it's got Low on the board as well. It's just really, really kind of cool. All from a low investment of one card combo. And even then, you didn't even go into Nibiru territory, so you don't even need to worry about that. Anyway, that is it for the entire profile. I hope this has given you a very brief breakdown into the deck. Like I said, if you want to know a bit more of how the deck can operate, what the Nadir Servant version looks like, then I would highly advise going and checking out MST TV's video, just because it gives you different outcomes of the combos, which I feel was massively helpful and massively informative, no matter how you're going to play it, really. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you do like, comment, subscribe, share. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, please put in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.